please identify yourself and state which news organization you're with. We have one question in the back from the woman in the white, and a second question. Yeah.
Okay. Hello, my name's Laurel Henning, and I'm a journalist with MLEX. Thank you very much for your presentations this morning. Two small questions. The actions that you want to be implemented now that are simple to implement, how can we make governments do that, actually take that action to implement them? And secondly, obviously we're focusing on the 2015 UN talks, but there are talks this December. What are the IEA's hopes and realistic expectations of those talks? Because at the moment, expectations are fairly low. Yeah, thank you very much.
We have another one right here, the gentleman in the gray suit.
Thank you. David Buchan, freelance energy writer. I think it's very laudable you're trying to keep the 2-degree target alive, but you put a lot of weight on energy efficiency, which is usually just a saving relative to what business as usual in the future might be. It's not usually an absolute reduction, but you suggest that you can make absolute reductions of emissions, at least in that 50% gain that you hope from energy efficiency. It seems to me that you can only get that if you assume there is no rebound effect. In other words, people using more energy efficient appliances more, no real increase in the population, and no return to rapid economic growth. Are you making these assumptions?
Yes, and the third one, the gentleman in the front with Bloomberg.
Hello, Matthew Carr from Bloomberg. So you seem to be saying to the coal and gas producers out there that if you want to keep producing coal and gas, you need to get more enthusiastic about CCS. And it follows up from that other question, how can you entice them even more or entice governments to follow through with that policy?
Thank you.
Okay. I would like to ask to answer one or two of the questions, and then, of course, Fatih Birol will answer the other ones. Well, the big question, of course, is what can we do about it now, and what can IEA do about it now? IEA is a think tank, among others, and we are advisory board to governments. And what we can see is that governments use the reports we are publishing. So that's that's the first thing we can do, ringing the bell, based on data and analysis, not just out of the blue or wishful thinking. No, based on data and analysis, we show the world what's going on. And that's why we decided last year, Fatih, to have this report. Because in our view, it's of extreme importance to make clear what the interaction between climate and the energy sector is. And it's not a one-way trajectory, it's two ways. And this is what we do with this report. That's one thing. Now, the second thing, of course, is how to get that attention for this situation. In November this year, we'll have our ministerial meeting. Our 28 member countries will be there. We also invite 7 key partner countries: China, Russia, India, Indonesia, South Africa, Mexico, and Brazil. Key countries when it is about this issue about energy and climate. And we invite our Energy Business Council to discuss, among others, the result of this report. And then the next step is, and that's up to them to decide, to make decisions that see to it that what we show them is put into practice. And then, I mean, the good things we show them, results, the solutions that are shown. We can't do that. IEA doesn't have the power to do that. Our power is, and I have to admit, using press, using public opinion to show what's happening, to ring the bell, to discuss it, and then induce our governments and our companies that are in our Energy Business Council to do something about it, to take the right decisions. That's one thing I would like to mention. Then there's one thing about energy efficiency I would like to mention. You could be right. But we don't want that to happen. Because if what happened what you suggest, then if you have to pay, for instance, less per unit for the energy you consume, and you use less units, well, what are you going to do? And, hey, I can have more appliances, I can have a second fridge, I can have 3 televisions, etc., etc., etc. This is not what we like to happen. We don't want that. So it's only effective if you look into the energy efficiency pricing and the pricing of electricity at the same time. Not look at the price per unit, but what are you going to pay below the line? That's the point, what matters. Because we want to disencourage wasteful consumption. And you can only do that by looking at the price below the line, and that means that the price per unit needs to be higher. Otherwise, what you mentioned will happen, and this is what we do not like to see happening. Fatih.
Thank you very much, Maria. First of all, about our executive director told you about the governments taking up or not, but I can tell you that last year, I think this time, 2 years ago, we made the golden rules for a golden age of gas. We suggested some rules, 7 rules to oil and gas industry to pick up in order to produce shale gas in a sustainable manner. It was 2 years ago, and we see today it is becoming a benchmark in many countries and many companies, using our 7 rules we suggested for producing shale gas in a sustainable manner, ranging from water contamination issue to a methane issue. So here we hope that they pick up again, as our executive director told you, it will be discussed in our ministerial meeting. And you mentioned, linking to your second question about the negotiations in December, from here, while our executive director goes to a very important meeting in Canada, I am going to Bonn, invited by the UNFCCC, especially to present this report to all the negotiators of 180 countries, showing their interest for the negotiation, with the hope that we provide some impetus for the 2013-14, but most important, 2015 meeting. Very quickly, the David's question on the rebound effect. Yes, David, those numbers do all take into account after the rebound effect. So there is a rebound effect which is important in many cases, but we take into account the rebound effect, and after the rebound effect, this impact comes out, and we also suggest how to deal with the rebound effect as well. And I am a person who started to believe very strongly that the energy efficiency, I always believe in energy efficiency, but I see in many countries right numbers. I am somebody who makes the hands dirty with data. I can tell you that in the US, if we see a major improvement in terms of the oil self-sufficiency, if the one part of the success is because of the shale oils in North Dakota, the second part of the success story is the efficiency improvement in cars, bring the domestic demand down as a result of CAFE standards set by the first Obama administration. And second, in China, I told you 3.8% energy intensity improvement. This is huge, ladies and gentlemen. These are numbers, and these are definitely very encouraging. But this needs to go over, as we have suggested, and go to many countries and many products. Finally, about CCS, especially coal industry has to definitely take the CCS more and more seriously. They are making a lot of efforts. Some companies set very stringent, very good targets for CCS, and CCS is a very critical technology, which could be an asset protection strategy for coal and others. Therefore, this is our International Energy Agency's one of the key suggestions, not only for this report, but in general, we put a lot of emphasis on carbon capture and storage, and this is the message we send to here from coal, gas, and other communities.
Thank you. The next question, Nick Coleman from Argus.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. A couple of questions. Are you adapting your climate modelling, as you go forward? I mention this because we're seeing more questions about climate change and what exactly is happening with the climate in the UK from Lord Stern, who reportedly said that the climate had not, that the temperature had not increased in the last decade. I don't think he's saying that we don't need to worry, but maybe you could comment on that. And the other thing is your business as usual scenario. I just wonder if you could just unpack a little bit what that means. Does it take account of innovation, which in a way can be expected to improve efficiency? Also, you mentioned other economic forces, such as in the Middle East, where governments are forced to reduce subsidies, not necessarily for climate reasons, but due to economic pressures. So perhaps you could unpack a little the business as usual idea. Thanks.
Next question from David.
Thank you. Hi, David Strawner, Energy Freelance. You say this can all be done, or these 4 measures can be done at no net economic cost, and that sounds great, but of course within that, as your own presentation shows, there are winners and losers. If it can be done at no net economic cost, one wonders why it hasn't happened already. So who are the obstacles? Who's getting in the way of this? Who is preventing this happening? Because otherwise, why hasn't it happened already?
Third question from Sally.
Thank you. Sally Bakewell, Bloomberg News. Europe has started a debate on climate change policy to 2030. What do you think this should look like, taking into account the successes and failures of the policy to 2020? For example, should we have 3 targets again? Thank you.
Thank you.
So, I would be surprised if, I didn't read that article you mentioned that Nick Stern said that there was no climate change and no warming. That's true. The last 10 decades, the warming, we have not seen a major increase, but the last 10 years, the average temperature was one of the highest in the last several decades. And Nick Stern himself was one of the peer reviewers of this study, which gave very good suggestions to us. I don't think that we should focus on this year or that year. We should look at the general historical trends. And as you see in the beginning of our book, there is a strong increase in the carbon concentration, which is very closely correlated with the increase in the average global temperature. So from that point of view, I don't see a major problem. I didn't know that Nick had, as you mentioned, Nick Stern had such a remark. In terms of business as usual, what did we take into account in our base scenario? We took into account the incremental improvement of energy technology. We have not foreseen in our base case scenario, business as usual scenario, a major breakthrough of policies, but the improvement of energy efficiency in line with the historical trends, but without having major policy intervention, such as these 4 policies we are trying to inject in the global energy markets. The likelihood of Middle East subsidies to be phased out. So it is difficult to estimate about the subsidies and Middle East many things, but when you put Middle East and subsidies together, it is definitely important to note that many countries are now putting this high in the agenda. It's not because of climate change. You know what is it because? It is because of the economic reasons. For example, in many key producing countries in Middle East, the domestic demand is growing so strongly that the oil, which is very important export revenue generator for the economies, the availability of oil for exports is diminishing. When the production stays at a certain level, if the domestic demand decreases so strongly because of the very low, cheap domestic energy prices, their very important revenue generation stream is becoming limited. And as such, I think in Iran, for example, there are steps put forward. Another oil-producing, exporting country, Nigeria, made a big jump. Perhaps it should have been implemented in a more careful way. They went back now, but compared to where they started, there's a 50% of increase of the energy prices. So even oil exporting countries need to look at the subsidy issue carefully, and we expect that there will be improvement of the oil product pricing in the many oil exporting countries in the next years to come. And Russia, in that respect, made definitely some significant efforts that we should register. So the question of David, yes, you are right. There, what we say is there is no net economic cost to the economy of a given country or given region. There will be definitely some losers. For example, if you have an inefficient coal power plant, you should be you are not definitely one of the winners. But there are winners such as the consumers, which will, because of energy efficiency, which will pay less electricity bills. So why it is not happening? Because you do not have the regulatory framework, the regulations coming from governments to push forward. Therefore, all of our policies, they do not require a major international climate change agreement or anything. This needs national policies, government policies put in place, and to make the energy sector move in the right direction, and to make sure that while CO2 emissions decrease, while energy efficiency improves, there are winners and losers, and therefore the policies need to be put in place, and the macroeconomy of the country will not be negatively affected. So there are some questions on Europe. Perhaps I should start to say that Europe put a very strong target for 2020, and in many cases they are reaching those targets, and they are discussing for 2030 targets on different fronts. It is up to Europe how they reach the targets, which policies they are going to choose. But some of the policies we mentioned are, we hope, they will be cornerstones for European 2030 targets, such as the energy efficiency, such as pushing the renewables through opening way for them in the markets, and such as also putting more emphasis on carbon capture and storage. But not be so bright, keeping in mind that the European economy is going through difficult days. We shouldn't forget that Europe has been the leader, the intellectual leader of fighting against climate change for many years. So we have to definitely recognize it, and we hope that Europe stays in this course with right policies, on one hand reaching the climate targets, but on the other hand trying to stay competitive in with their economy and industry.
I would like to add a few words for Fatih's answer on the last question on Europe. There will be elections next year, new European Parliament, new European Commission, and I think this will offer an extreme good opportunity to review everything that is already in progress and see what can be done, not only up to 2020 or 2030, but beyond. I would like to mention once again, but you did it and we do it every time, when we are talking about energy and climate, we have to take a long-term horizon, because all the investments in energy infrastructure that are under consideration today and will be in place tomorrow, say 2017, many of them will be there for 50 years or more. And that's something we have to take into account. It's not just having a good solution up to 2020. And that's why our report is an important step, but it is just a step. And we must not let governments off the hook too easily by saying that They only need to have these 4 policies. They need these 4 policies to go ahead. And without these 4 policies, they will be in a much better shape. They will be in a much worse shape. They will be in a worse shape. So that's what I would like to mention. And although there are some good signs in Europe, in China, in the United States, let's not sing hallelujah, because we are not there by far.
I think we have time for just one more question. Perhaps this gentleman here in the blue blazer.
Thank you very much, Julian O'Halloran, BBC Current Affairs. It's just a small factual point, really. You talked, Mr. Birol, throughout your presentation about this 2 degrees centigrade target, and then towards the end you suddenly mentioned your central scenario, which I assume was for temperature increase. You did not say precisely what that was. Is it somewhere halfway between your 3.6% and 5.3%? And if so, how alarming is that prospect, and what warning would you issue about a drift towards what I calculated, my very rough maths, to be around a 4.5 centigrade or Celsius increase by 2100?
So it means we can leave the climate modeling to the journalists. Your calculation is not very bad, I should say. This is very, very close. So our central scenario is providing a in line with a temperature increase up to 4 degrees Celsius. So which is which will have devastating implications for our planet. So the difference between 2 degrees and 4 degrees is not you just take off your jacket and it is more comfortable. It is not like that. It's a huge difference for the rather fragile equilibrium of our planet. And it is the very reason we suggest these 4 concrete policies so that the door to 2 degrees is not closed. So many people say that 2 degrees is becoming difficult to achieve or impossible to achieve. We think it is still technically it is feasible, and yes, the chances to reach the 2 degrees are declining, but this doesn't mean that we should continue with the inaction. If we don't reach the 2 degrees target, if it is 2.1, 2.2 degrees, the temperature increase, it is still much better than the 4 degrees, and it is the reason why the World Energy Outlook has suggested these 4 concrete policies to governments to act immediately and to make a bridge between now and 2020.
Thank you very much. That concludes the question and answer portion of the press conference.